Welcome to this YouTube channel. Today we are going to look at pivot tables, and my focus will be on the different tricks and tips that we can use to improve our work and productivity as we work with pivot table. For starters, if you do not know how to prepare pivot table, we can just do that very fast. Highlight the data we have here, then go to Insert Pivot Table, fix the data range that we have. That's correct, I picked it. I do nothing on that. I come here down. Where do you want the pivot report to be placed? You want it on a new sheet or an existing sheet? By default, it is a new sheet. So if I want it on a sheet, I just leave it here and say, okay. But I want it on this sheet, I click on existing sheet. Then I need to indicate which location I want it to start here. It picks the cell reference and say OK. Once I do that, a dialog on your right called pivot table fields shows up with the different fields that it picks automatically from this table here. So what do I want? I want regions as rows. There you go, you get the regions as rows, and my values are in the cells field. So I pick up the cells, put it there, and you get your regions against cells. I want countries to be below each of these regions. So I pick country, put it below the region here, and I get like so. I get this, my pivot table summarized by region, by country, and we have a grand total down here. So that is easy and fast way of preparing a pivot table. Now I'm going to look at different tips and tricks on how we can do the designs, how we can change this pivot table, how we can treat it around, put on different fields, different calculations, and the rest. So my first tip is, assuming on the right here we have the pivot table fields dialog, assuming this one is closed, and you want to bring it back, where do you go? Just click on the pivot table, right click, go to the last show field list, and it will show up here. So that is how you can remove it, and you can also bring it up. So in case it disappears, don't get worried. Just go on the pivot table, right click, and it will show up there. Tip number 2, I'm going to look at how to group data in this pivot table. But before I look at that, I want to move data. This is another tip. I want to move America down so that it's near Europe and Asia up. So what I do, I hover over America. When I see the cross, I know it is time to move, drag it down above Europe. So this is a way you can drag up and down. That is one of the tips. But tip number 2 still, now I want to group Asia and Africa, and also America and Europe. I want to group them together. So I highlight Africa and Asia, right click, and go to group. So when you do that, see a group 1 forming here, and this group 1 is made up of Africa and Asia. Then I want another group made up of America and Europe. Highlight the 2, group. There you go. You have group 1 with these 2 continents, and group 2 with another 2 continents. So the other thing you could do, you could say, I don't want this word group 1 and group 2, but I want something else. So what you do, you change it, click on group 1 and say maybe countries 1, then go to group 2, come above here and say countries 2. Now, the name does not matter, but what matters is understanding how you can change it to what you want. So that's how you can group data. So assuming now I'm no longer interested in these groups, and I want to ungroup, right click, go to ungroup, right click, go to ungroup, goes away. Looks like you have to first highlight it, then ungroup, then the groups disappear from our data set. The other trick I want to show you is assuming I'm no longer interested in this cells column, how do I remove it? The quick way to do it, click around the column, right click, then remove some of cells like so, then it goes away. Bring it back, Control Z. Tip number 4 is summarize values by count. Currently here, I have values by sum. In other words, this pivot table goes into this table, sums all the cells relating to Kenya, brings it and inserts it here, does the same for Nigeria, then gets the total for all countries in Africa and gets a subtotal there. That's what it does. Now, assuming I want to change it, instead of having sum here, I have count. In other words, I want to count how many entries does Kenya have, how many entries does Nigeria have, and I have it counted here. So to do that, I can insert another column, maybe drag my cells again and insert it there. It becomes cells 2. Then I right click, I go to summarize values by. As you can see, the sum is clicked up here. Now I want it to change into count. When I do that, now it gives me the count of these various countries and regions. So that is how you can change the values. A bonus tip here, you can also change it into percentage. Right click, so show percentage of total column, like so, then it gives you percentage. So these are quick methods of how you can change around your pivot table. Tip number 5, assuming I have my pivot table on this sheet and I want to shift it to another sheet, what do I do? So when you click on the pivot table, there are 2 tabs that appear above here. One is called Analyze, and the other one is called Design. So if I want to move the pivot table to another sheet, I'll click on Analyze. Then when I come down here, I see the function called Move Pivot Table. So I click on that. Now it brings a dialog which says Move Pivot Table. Choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed. It gives me 2 options. If I want it on a new sheet, I say New Sheet, then it creates a new sheet and will shift the pivot table there. If I want to an existing sheet, but which is not the current sheet, I want an existing sheet, I'll need to click there, then click in there on the arrow, go to the sheet where I want to place it, click on the cell where I want to start, say, come back and say, okay. The moment you do that, your pivot table is shifted to a new sheet, as you can see. However, this is how you can do it. If you want to take it back, I'll go through the same method, Analyze, Move Pivot Table to an existing sheet, click there, go back to where I was, it started here, click on the arrow, say OK, and it automatically comes back to this sheet. Okay. Now, next, if the next tip is show details of values in a pivot table. Okay. Now, if you go under design, I can change how this pivot table looks like. So when I click on the pivot table, two tabs appear above here. Then I need to go to the design tab. Then in here, I can change how this pivot table looks like. So if I move to the left, I see subtotals. There's a drop down there. Do not show subtotals. If I click there, you're going to observe that the subtotals for the regions are going to disappear. So I click there and you can see they have disappeared from my pivot table. If I go back and look at the other options, show all subtotals at the bottom. What it does, it will show the subtotals at the bottom of the group. So Africa, total of Africa is that. You can also show subtotals at the top by going back here and clicking show all subtotals at the top of group, like so, and then it is shifted to the top. The next tip I show you is on grand totals. So again, under design, if I want to change the behavior of my grand total, I can come here, off rows and columns. If I click there, you see the grand total, which has here disappeared. Go back. There's no rows, do not work. On columns, I can put the grand total, I can remove it. That is my tip number 8. Tip number 9, I can play around with how this report looks like. If I go to report layout, the default is this first one, which show in compact form. This is how it looks like. When I click on it, nothing happens. However, if I move to the next, show in outline form. If I click there, it creates a new column for the region. Then we have country and our cells. If we go back to the layout, show in tabular form. If I click there, this is the tabular form. Now I can want to repeat the name Africa on different Asia and America. In my layout, I can go there and say, repeat all item labels. The moment I click that, you can see the label Africa repeating, the label Asia repeating, and so on. The next one here is do not repeat. When I click there, they go off. So this is how you can change the format of your table, of your pivot table. Now, of course, there are different options here. Row header. Then we have column headers, like so, if you want them bold or not. Branded rows. If I do that, my rows get branded. If I do not want them branded, I come that. If I want the columns branded, click on the column, then it brands them like so. And in addition to that, there are all these other designs you can explore on your own. The next tip is about the data source. That one is under Analyze. Now, when you click on data source, it will clearly show you the data that has been used, the range of the data. Start from B1 to E39. That's where my data ends. So that this pivot table is based on the data in this given range. However, if I came down here and I added another row of data, I added another row of data here, and I changed the value like so, Now if you remember, my range under data source ended at 39. But if I add this row of data and I go back to my pivot table, you realize that that row of data will not be included in my analysis in the pivot table. So to correct that and bring it in, this is where the data source comes in, where you'll go to your data source, go to your data source, analyze data source, and it says it stops on E39. I need to change this to E40 and say OK. So when I do that, my last data entry is brought into the pivot table. The bonus tip here I can show you is to format these numbers. You can right click, format numbers. This dialog comes up, so you can remove the decimals if you don't want them. Take the decimals to 0, put commas, and say OK, and your information will be shown as indicated here. So those are some of the tips you can use on the pivot table. If you like this video, please subscribe. I hope this has been helpful. See you in the next video and have a great day. Thank you for watching.